It began with a curve, not the arc of a planet, nor the gentle fold of a galaxy's spiral arm, but a curvature so vast and subtle, it evaded detection for generations. Astronomers once called it background noise, the quiet static of creation, the afterglow of the Big Bang, until, deep in the cold black of the James Webb Space Telescope's final imaging run, the numbers refused to behave. Something at the edge of the observable universe bent light too perfectly, as though reality itself were being folded back upon its own fabric. Photons, ancient as time, looped with impossible symmetry, returning like echoes that should have been lost forever. What they revealed was not distance, but confinement. The cosmos in all its breadth might not be expanding into an infinite void, it might be expanding inward. At first, it was dismissed as a calibration anomaly. Then, as more data came, gravitational wave interference patterns, isotropic distortions, the faint warping of deep space radio pulses, a whisper began to take form among the scientific community. A forbidden idea, one that reached beyond cosmology into metaphysics. What if the universe is not in space at all, but inside something else? It was an old speculation, buried in the margins of theoretical physics, spoken of only in thought experiments. If every black hole creates a pocket of spacetime within its event horizon, then perhaps every universe begins not with a bang, but with a collapse. What if the birth of our cosmos, that incandescent singularity, 8 billion years ago, was the death of another? From that possibility, the silence of space began to sound different. Every flickering star, every fading signal, every background photon might not be the echo of creation, but the muffled heartbeat of a greater body, the pulse of a star that had once burned in another universe. The cosmos, then, would be a womb of gravity. Scientists turned to mathematics for refuge. Einstein's general relativity, that beautiful theory of curvature and mass, already hinted that gravity and time are inseparable. If gravity becomes infinite, time itself ceases to exist, and yet within that stillness, quantum mechanics predicts violent fluctuations, seeding existence anew. Collapse and creation, therefore, might not be opposites, but consecutive stages of one infinite cycle. But this new data contained more than equations could comfort. The horizon of our universe, once thought to be the final boundary, now resembled an event horizon, the very membrane that defines a black hole. The expansion rate of galaxies, once explained by dark energy, began to mirror the equations governing the interior geometry of a black hole's spacetime bubble. The universe perhaps was not flying outward into nothingness, it was spiraling within, an infinite fall that feels like flight. And in that realization, something shifted in human thought. The word outside lost meaning. If the universe was the interior of a greater collapse, then what lies beyond it? A cosmos of unimaginable density, apparent reality, a higher dimensional expanse from which our own was born in the moment of death. We would be, then, the descendants of annihilation, living inside the memory of a dying star. The philosophical weight of this revelation rippled through physics like an electric storm. For centuries, humanity believed itself to be looking outward, mapping the heavens, measuring the void, but perhaps we have never looked out at all. Perhaps every telescope is turned inward, into the womb that birthed us. The stars are not distant beacons, but reflections inside a curved mirror, each photon looping through the same finite sphere, painting illusion upon illusion. The realization was terrifying in its intimacy. If the universe were the interior of a black hole, then every second that passes is another step deeper into the singularity. Every cosmic expansion is paradoxically a contraction, every breath of creation a prelude to ultimate compression. Time itself would not be linear, but recursive, curling around its own birth and death like the event horizon it cannot escape. It would mean that the laws we revere, entropy, light speed, conservation, are local customs of our containment, rules written on the inside of the prison. Beyond the horizon they may break. Beyond the horizon there may be no beyond at all. The first to speak this aloud was not a physicist, but a poet working as a data technician. She called the pattern the heartbeat of God. Her supervisor struck the phrase from the report, replacing it with periodic gravitational resonance anomaly. But the phrase remained, whispered among researchers and echoed in sleepless minds. The heartbeat of God. The pulse of a collapsing star that gave birth to all that is. And if that heartbeat still thrums through the dark, perhaps we are its rhythm. Galaxies as neurons, light as thought. The cosmic web, viewed through the lens of quantum gravity, resembles a brain in dream. The filaments of matter are synaptic. the voids between them like pauses in consciousness. What if the universe is thinking, not metaphorically, but literally? It's every fluctuation a signal in some unfathomable neural storm. Yet even thought requires context, an observer to interpret, and within a black hole, observation itself becomes paradoxical. Time slows to stillness, light bends into darkness, information cannot escape. And still within that total silence, something new begins. To look at the night sky then is to peer into the interior of an event, not a place, but a process. We are suspended not in space, but in a cosmic memory of collapse, still unfolding. Everything we call the present is an artifact of light too old to belong to us, refracted endlessly within the black horizon's interior geometry. It changes everything, not the physics, not yet, but the meaning. If the universe is inside a black hole, then creation itself is an act of recursion, not expansion. The universe becomes the thought of another universe dying, and we, the thinking fragments of that memory, are attempting to remember what it was like to be whole. In the observatories orbiting above our pale blue world, sensors continue to hum, their data streams filled with whispers of curvature, background static, gravitational murmurs. Somewhere in that noise, perhaps the shape of the parent universe still lingers, its collapse, its final radiation, its death cry stretched across eons until it sounds like silence. And if we listen closely enough, perhaps we will hear it. The faint rhythm beneath all things, the cosmic pulse that gave us time, stars, consciousness itself, the dying heartbeat that still beats within us. But if every universe is born from another's death, if every black hole births a new cosmos within, then the cycle has no beginning and no end. We are part of an infinite genealogy of collapses, each child universe carrying the echo of its parents' fall. And so the question that trembles at the edge of comprehension remains: if we are inside a black hole, what universe is dreaming us now, and what will awaken when we collapse? For centuries, humanity built its understanding of the universe on the foundation of radiant simplicity. Everything began with a singularity, a single infinitesimal point where all matter, energy, and space-time converged in an unimaginable density, a seed of existence. 13.8 billion years ago, it erupted, not into space, but as space, carrying the blueprint of all future galaxies, stars, and worlds. This was the genesis of the known, the Big Bang, the ultimate beginning, the first moment when there was a when. From that singular flash of being, time began to flow, uncoiling like a vast ribbon across the void. The early universe was not black, but white hot, a plasma ocean glowing with the first photons, hydrogen and helium, swirling in a chaotic ballet. Gravity sculpted the dance, gathering clouds of gas into the embryonic forms of galaxies. Stars ignited in brilliant cascades of fusion, forging heavier elements in their cores and scattering them in luminous deaths. Out of these ashes, planets formed. Out of those planets, one, small, blue and fragile, grew eyes to look back at the darkness. The scientific narrative unfolded with mathematical precision. The universe expands, driven by an invisible energy that stretches the fabric of space. Entropy increases, order dissolves into disorder, complexity blooms only temporarily before decay claims it. Galaxies drift apart, the night grows colder, and cosmic microwave radiation hums as the faint echo of that first explosion. On this fragile world, floating in the quiet between the stars, life appeared. Chemistry became biology, molecules learned to remember, and memory became consciousness. The theory of abiogenesis proposes that life arose from non-life, from a primordial soup of organic molecules, warmed by lightning or volcanic heat, shaped by chance into patterns that could replicate. Over billions of years, those patterns evolved, adapting, diversifying, competing. Natural selection became the sculptor of form and thought alike. In this model, there is no need for design, only time. Given enough of it, matter organizes itself into complexity, from atoms to molecules, from cells to minds capable of wondering why they exist at all. It is a narrative both humble and grand, explaining everything from the birth of galaxies to the color of a human eye, through the language of physics and probability. The cosmic order, as understood, is indifferent. Stars live and die without purpose. Black holes devour light without remorse. Life arises where conditions permit and vanishes when they fail. Meaning, under this paradigm, is a local illusion, a survival mechanism, a byproduct of pattern recognition in brains evolved to fear the dark. Yet there is beauty in this coldness, The equations that describe the universe, Einstein's relativity, Maxwell's electromagnetism, Schrödinger's wave functions, are elegant beyond measure. They form a cathedral of logic where nature reveals herself not through prophecy, but through predictability. Observation and measurement are the rituals of this religion. The telescope is its altar, the experiment its prayer. Every discovery reinforced the same faith. The universe is lawful, comprehensible, and continuous. The expansion of galaxies proves a common origin. The background radiation confirms the explosion that birthed everything. Even chaos obeys probability. Even randomness has structure. There are no miracles, only phenomena awaiting explanation. In this worldview, humanity is not the center, but an accident. The Earth is a statistical inevitability among countless others. The laws of physics apply equally to the supercluster and the microbe. We are made of the same elements as stars, governed by the same equations that describe the movement of galaxies. The cosmos is one unbroken mechanism, vast, deterministic, and impartial. This vision gave comfort to reason. It replaced divine creation with cosmic emergence, providence with process. It taught that the universe requires no external architect. The same gravitational collapse that births a star can also birth a world, a civilization, a consciousness. Nothing transcends the laws of nature because nothing exists outside them. For generations, this understanding held the night at bay. Humanity built instruments to listen to the ancient whispers of light, radio telescopes scanning for cosmic background radiation, particle accelerators recreating conditions of the early universe. Each confirmed the narrative's symmetry, from simplicity to complexity, from chaos to order, from the void to awareness. The story of everything could be traced backward, all the way to the singularity. But not before, never before. Time itself began at that moment of creation. There was no before, no outside. The universe, they said, is self-contained. It needs no origin beyond its own laws, and so the human mind accepted its boundaries. The Big Bang was the first page, the rest written by physics. Dark energy pushes, dark matter pulls, and galaxies swim in an expanding ocean whose edges no one will ever reach. In this model, infinity is not a place, but an asymptote, always approached, never attained. It was an elegant solitude, a universe of pure causality, a cosmos indifferent but comprehensible. Existence under this light was the unfolding of equations written in the geometry of space-time. Even black holes, those cosmic abysses of mystery, fit neatly within the framework, the inevitable outcome of gravity overpowering light, a side effect of mass and curvature. They were paradoxes only in appearance, their mysteries expected, their horizons well behaved in theory. There was comfort in the neatness. It meant the universe could be known. It meant that, given enough time, every phenomenon could be explained, every enigma dissolved into understanding. And yet, beneath the precision, a question lingered, silent but persistent. Because even in this flawless narrative, something felt incomplete. If the universe began as a singularity, infinitely dense, infinitely hot, how did it escape its own impossibility? How does time emerge from a state where time does not exist? How does something finite arise from the absolute absence of scale? Science, though confident, could only describe what happens after the beginning. The singularity itself was not a moment in time, but the absence of it. The equations break there, like a wave crashing against a shore that cannot be crossed. The first instant remains forbidden, the ultimate blind spot of knowledge. To accept the standard model is to accept that the universe began without a cause, that everything, space, time, energy, matter, erupted from nothing. But nothing, by definition, has no properties from which anything can erupt. The paradox is hidden by the limits of comprehension, disguised by mathematics that approaches infinity, but never quite touches it. Still, humanity preferred this elegant uncertainty to chaos. It was a story that gave order to the void, one where meaning could emerge from law, and law from symmetry. The Big Bang was both creation and containment, both answer and question. It told us that the universe is knowable, that our minds, born from stardust, could decipher the song of the stars. And yet, behind the beauty of equations, behind the silence of galaxies receding, lies the whisper of something unaccounted for, a presence implied by the very order we revere. Because if the universe follows rules, one must ask, where did the rules come from? If everything has an origin, and the universe is everything, then what lies beyond the edge of existence? What reality gave birth to this one? And how could we ever know from inside? At first, the universe appeared obedient, its galaxies drifting apart in precise accordance with the equations that govern them, its background radiation whispering the same ancient temperature across the void. The great cosmological narrative seemed settled: expansion, cooling, formation, decay. But beneath that apparent order, a series of quiet betrayals began to emerge. The first was found in light. When astronomers mapped the cosmic microwave background, they expected randomness, the faint, uniform residue of creation. Instead, they found alignments, faint axes running across billions of light years, as though the universe possessed a preferred direction. It was soon called the axis of evil, a phrase that made theorists uncomfortable, not for its drama, but for its implication. The cosmos, supposedly isotropic and homogeneous, was showing signs of structure far beyond chance. Light, which should have been indifferent, was whispering of hidden symmetry, a signature, perhaps, of forces or geometries unknown. The background hum of creation carried a memory it should not have had, a pattern as if the entire universe was slightly twisted, coiled within a larger curvature unseen. Then came the mystery of acceleration. Galaxies were not merely moving apart, they were racing away faster than expected. The universe, against all intuition, was speeding up, as if pulled outward by a hand that should not exist. To account for this, cosmologists invoked dark energy, a name more poetic than explanatory. It filled space, they said, an invisible pressure accelerating expansion. Yet no one knew what it was, nor why it behaved with such exquisite precision that a change of one part in 1,000 would make the universe collapse or disperse into nothing. Dark energy was not a discovery, it was a placeholder, an admission that something vast and essential had been missed. The same was true for its twin, dark matter. Galaxies spun too fast to be held together by visible mass. Invisible halos, unseen scaffolds of gravity, were said to cradle them. For decades, detectors buried deep underground waited for even a single particle to reveal itself. None did. The cosmos, it seemed, was composed mostly of what could not be seen, weighed, or understood. In the face of such invisibility, the human mind did what it always does. It named the unknown dark matter, dark energy. The darkness was linguistic before it was physical, but naming is not knowing. The James Webb Space Telescope, designed to look further back in time than any instrument before it, began to reveal galaxies older than they should be, too massive, too luminous, too evolved for a universe barely a few 100 million years old. The early cosmos was supposed to be a turbulent fog of gas and infant stars, yet there stood mature systems, cosmic cities already glowing with starlight. According to the accepted models, they simply should not exist. The timeline was fracturing. The universe had aged faster than its age allowed. Some proposed adjustments to the models, new forms of dark matter, altered constants, revised expansion rates. But with each patch, the mystery deepened. Every correction led to another question. Every new equation required another assumption. The cosmos no longer fit the script it had written for itself. At quantum scales, contradictions multiplied. The laws of general relativity, so majestic in describing the motion of planets and galaxies, collapsed into nonsense when applied to the subatomic world. Gravity refused to quantize. Space dissolved into probability. Reality, when examined too closely, evaporated into uncertainty. Physicists had long accepted this duality. The macro obeys Einstein, the micro obeys Schrödinger, but beneath the acceptance lurked a quiet despair. The two great pillars of modern science stood side by side, perfectly successful and utterly incompatible. They were separate languages describing the same reality, yet neither could translate the other without breaking. Between them lay a silence, an invisible chasm where understanding falls away, and within that silence, other peculiarities began to shimmer. The fine structure constant, which dictates how strongly particles interact, seemed suspiciously precise, as though calibrated. The speed of light, the charge of the electron, the ratio of proton to neutron mass, all balanced on impossibly narrow margins. Change any by the smallest fraction, and atoms could not exist, stars could not burn, life could not arise. Coincidence, perhaps, but the more one looked, the less coincidental it seemed. Even the cosmic background itself, that faint radiation left from the dawn of time, contained a symmetry too perfect to be natural. It was the same temperature everywhere, across distances too vast for light ever to have travelled between them. Somehow, information had spread faster than causality should allow. The early universe behaved as though it had known itself entirely at once, like a mind aware of its own shape before it opened its eyes. Cosmologists proposed inflation, an era of hyper-rapid expansion, faster than light, to smooth the early irregularities. It worked mathematically but not philosophically. What could cause such a phase? What field, what force, what hand set the parameters for such an impossible inflation? The explanation became a ritual of necessity, a patch placed over the mystery to preserve coherence. But coherence itself was beginning to tremble. Even black holes, once treated as endpoints, began to rebel against simplicity. Stephen Hawking showed that they radiate, that they eventually evaporate, and if they do, where does the information go? Quantum mechanics forbids its destruction, yet gravity swallows it whole. The paradox tore at the seams of understanding. Somewhere between the event horizon and the singularity, the universe was violating its own laws. When physicists tried to resolve this, their equations turned inside out. Some suggested holographic principles, that all information in the universe is encoded on its boundaries. Others proposed that space-time itself is emergent, an illusion woven from entanglement. In every direction, the same whisper returned: what we call reality may not be fundamental, and if the universe itself is an emergent surface, could it not be the interior of something larger? The anomalies grew harder to dismiss. The cosmic expansion rate, measured by different methods, yielded conflicting results, the so-called Hubble tension. Depending on where and how it was measured, the universe appeared to be expanding at incompatible speeds. No single constant could reconcile them. It was as if time itself flowed differently in different regions of the cosmos. Light, too, began to betray us. Some quasars, beacons from the distant past, flickered in rhythms too regular to be random, too precise to be natural. The pulse intervals echoed ratios found in fundamental constants, as though the universe were speaking to itself in the language of mathematics. A few called it coincidence, others, pattern recognition run wild. Yet a small group of cosmologists dared to consider the possibility that these were signatures, not of intelligence as we know it, but of structure itself, messages written into the geometry of space-time. The notion was dismissed, of course. Science protects its borders with skepticism, but doubt, once planted, spreads like dark energy itself, silent, invisible, relentless. Everywhere the universe was supposed to be smooth, it rippled. Everywhere it was supposed to be random, it whispered of design. And always behind the data, there lingered an unease. The laws of physics were consistent, but only within this universe. They broke, twisted, or reversed at its edges, at its singularities, in the equations that describe its birth. Perhaps the laws were not universal after all, but local, artifacts of a greater environment we cannot perceive. If so, then what we call reality might be a regional phenomenon, a pocket of order suspended within something vaster, governed by different rules. Astronomers stared at the cosmic background and saw not a beginning, but a boundary. The further they looked, the more it resembled the inside of a surface, a curved horizon reflecting back upon itself. The old certainty began to fade, that the universe was open, infinite, and free. A new thought crept in, dangerous in its implications. If everything we see obeys a curvature, if all light bends inward, if even the edges of time return upon themselves, then perhaps we have never seen beyond the walls at all. And if our universe is not expanding outward, but falling inward, then every question about the beginning becomes a question about containment. What then are we inside of? It began as a data anomaly, a narrow frequency spike buried deep in the spectrographic noise of a dying star. Astronomers had been mapping the chemical signatures of exoplanet atmospheres, searching for the faint fingerprints of oxygen, methane, or carbon dioxide that might suggest habitability. But this was something else. It was not biological, it was not geological, it was something that did not belong to the periodic table as we knew it. The James Webb Space Telescope had been surveying a red dwarf in the constellation Lyra, a dim ember barely bright enough to pierce the interstellar dust. Around it, a cluster of small, irregular planets orbited in eccentric harmony. One of them, a scorched, barren sphere catalogued as Elichus 4189b, reflected a spectral pattern that no known compound could produce. The lines were sharp, repeating, fractal-like in symmetry. To the untrained eye, they looked like interference, but to those who understood the language of light, it was a sentence written across the void. The discovery spread quietly, then violently. Laboratories across Earth attempted to replicate the spectral pattern, bombarding molecules with radiation, cooling them to near absolute zero, heating them to plasma states. Nothing reproduced it. The anomaly persisted, stable, precise, and utterly alien to known chemistry. It was not an element nor a molecule. It was structure itself, encoded in light, Some suggested it was a computational artifact, a reflection of the telescope's optics. Others believed it might be an unknown crystalline lattice forming under extreme conditions, but the ratios were too exact, the harmonics too ordered, when the same pattern appeared again, not once but in several distant systems, aligned across vast cosmic distances. Doubt turned into awe. The pattern was universal. It emerged in the reflective spectra of Exoplan, its orbiting unrelated stars, scattered across billions of light years. No known process could synchronize such complexity. The same ratios, the same repeating intervals of absorption and emission, written in the light of worlds that could never have touched. It was as if the cosmos itself had begun to hum a hidden frequency, a code embedded in its fabric. Astrophysicists plotted the intervals against known constants. Planck's constant, the speed of light, the fine structure constant. The ratios aligned with uncanny precision. It was as though the same hand that had set the speed of light had also written this message, a resonance not of matter, but of meaning. The anomaly began to behave like a mirror, reflecting not what was seen, but what observed it. When the telescope's parameters shifted, angle, polarization, time delay, the spectral lines adjusted as though responding. The light from these distant worlds seemed aware of being measured, and then came the second discovery, time delay correlations. When two telescopes, one on Earth and one orbiting the Moon, observed the same targets simultaneously, the pattern exhibited microscopic variations, as if carrying information between them faster than light. Each measurement, separated by thousands of kilometers, produced complementary noise that, when combined, formed a coherent sequence. It was not random. It was communication. The data was encrypted not in language, but in physics, a modulation of constants, a geometry of interference. The universe, long thought silent, was whispering through its own laws. It was impossible to accept. For decades, science had been haunted by Fermi's question: if the universe is full of life, where is everyone? Perhaps here was the answer, not in the form of radio signals or spacecraft, but in the structure of spacetime itself. If an intelligence wished to endure beyond the lifespan of stars, it would not write messages in matter. It would inscribe them in the equations that govern reality. Still, the rationalists held firm. They called it hyperfine spectral modulation, an unexplained but natural resonance emerging from the geometry of atomic interactions. But even they could not explain why the same signal appeared mirrored in the polarization of cosmic microwave background radiation, the oldest light in the universe. The same pattern, faint but unmistakable, was found woven into the afterglow of creation. It was older than galaxies, older than light itself. The discovery forced a re-evaluation of cosmological data. When the spectral ratios were mapped against galactic coordinates, they formed a lattice, a three-dimensional grid spanning observable space. The pattern resembled no random distribution, but rather an architectural design, as if galaxies were nodes in a cosmic circuit. Between them stretched invisible filaments of structure, not merely gravitational, but informational. The universe looked less like an explosion and more like an arrangement. Philosophers began to re-enter the conversation, their metaphors suddenly made literal. They spoke of a lattice of intent, of laws not as accidents but as code. Physicists, reluctant but fascinated, noted that the spectral signal's periodicity corresponded precisely to the frequencies predicted by models of quantum foam, the smallest possible fluctuations of spacetime. Somehow, the anomaly seemed to bridge the quantum and the cosmic, uniting the largest and smallest scales of existence in a single harmonic. What could generate such a resonance? Some proposed that it was the signature of a universe nested within another, a gravitational echo from an external cosmos whose curvature defines our own. Others speculated that the anomaly was the residue of an ancient intelligence, one that had encoded its memory into the laws of physics before vanishing, a civilization, perhaps, that learned how to speak through constants. And yet, the most unsettling theory came not from the astrophysicists, but from the mathematicians. When they translated the ratios into numerical sequences, the result resembled prime factorization, numbers that refused to divide evenly, the building blocks of encryption. The implication was staggering. The cosmos might be quantized not just physically, but informationally. Every photon, every gravitational wave might carry a bit of encoded data. The universe could be an archive. What then does it store? As more data poured in, the anomaly revealed its cruelty. It did not behave linearly. Observations at different times of year produced slight variations, as though the message were evolving. Some called it time drift, others feedback. But when the pattern was visualized in 4 dimensions, space and time combined, it resembled a spiral collapsing inward, a vortex of information converging toward a center. The realization struck like a cosmic déjà vu. The structure of the anomaly was mathematically identical to the curvature of spacetime around a black hole, the same geometry, the same inward pull, the same asymptotic fall toward infinity. What if the signal was not coming from beyond the universe, but from its core, from the center of its own curvature? What if the entire cosmos were echoing the structure of the singularity that birthed it? The spectral pattern then was not alien, it was intrinsic, it was the universe remembering itself, and so a quiet terror spread through the scientific community. The laws of physics might not be passive rules, but active processes, self-correcting, self-communicating. The cosmos could be recursive, aware, its constants adapting in ways imperceptible to human perception. If so, the anomaly was not merely evidence of another intelligence. It was evidence of intelligence itself, woven into the code of creation. Late one night, a group of researchers projected the frequency ratios into sound, translating light into vibration. The room filled with an otherworldly tone, deep and continuous, rising and falling with impossible precision. It sounded less like a signal and more like breathing. When the tone faded, one of them whispered what none dared to say aloud, that perhaps the universe is alive, not metaphorically, but literally, and what we call physics is its body, what we call mathematics its thought. The pattern persists, it changes subtly, each time it is observed, as though our attention alters it, as though the act of seeing feeds it. And if the universe is speaking through its own fabric, then perhaps the question is no longer whether we are alone, but whether we have ever been anything else. If this pattern is a message, then who or what is it meant for? There are moments in science when the data resists translation, when no theory can contain the strangeness of what is seen. Then the mind does something extraordinary. It crosses the boundary between description and imagination. What if it whispers the model itself is wrong? What if the cosmos we study is not what we think it is, but something inside of something greater, a structure within a structure, a universe contained, not suspended? The evidence, though scattered and ambiguous, began to converge toward a heresy that few dared to name aloud. The spectral anomaly, the curvature of spacetime, the accelerating expansion, all of it pointed to a single, forbidden interpretation. The universe behaves as though it is inside a black hole. The notion had been proposed before, in footnotes and speculative papers buried under decades of skepticism. Black holes, by their very nature, curve spacetime so severely that time slows to stillness at their edges and collapses inward beyond. From the outside, a black hole is an object of destruction. From the inside, it could be a world of creation. The same equations that describe a collapsing star can, when inverted, describe an expanding universe. What we call the Big Bang may not have been an explosion from nothing, but the moment of passage, the birth of a cosmos inside another cosmos. Imagine it, a massive star in some parent universe reaching the end of its life, collapsing under its own gravity, compressing space and time until they fold inward, tearing a hole through reality. On the other side of that collapse, spacetime does not end, it blooms. The singularity, rather than annihilating existence, seeds a new one. The laws of physics themselves are reborn, tuned slightly differently, each universe carrying the genetic imprint of its ancestor. Black holes as wombs, universes as offspring, existence as lineage. The theory has elegance, even poetry. It suggests a self-replicating cosmos, an evolutionary system where universes breed through gravitational collapse. The constants that permit life, the delicate balance of forces, the improbable fine-tuning, might be the result of cosmic natural selection. Universes that give rise to stars, and thus to black holes, propagate their own kind. Those that do not fade into sterile stillness, creation becomes a cycle, not an exception. But if we inhabit the interior of a black hole, then everything we perceive, every galaxy, every horizon, is shaped by that curvature. The cosmic expansion would not be outward, but inward, an illusion of flight created by continuous fall. The boundary we call the edge of the observable universe would be the event horizon, the limit beyond which no light from the parent universe can reach. Beyond it lies the realm that birthed us, unreachable, invisible, perhaps already dead. Within such a model, the cosmic background radiation is not merely the afterglow of the Big Bang, it is the echo of collapse, the lingering radiation from the star that birthed us. The faint hum of creation is the death cry of another world. We are living inside the shadow of its implosion. The implications ripple outward. If black holes birth universes, then perhaps our own contains countless children, each forming within the hearts of its stars. Every collapse, every gravitational death may be an act of genesis. Each black hole a seed, each singularity a gateway. From the outside, they are the ultimate voids. From the inside, they may be entire realities, each sealed within the gravity of another. What would that make of us? Our universe would not be infinite, but enclosed, curved back upon itself, its space finite yet unbounded, like the surface of a sphere, except in higher dimensions. What we perceive as cosmic expansion might be the stretching of space within this interior bubble, time itself slowing relative to the parent universe. Billions of years could pass for us, while beyond the event horizon, only seconds flow. If this were true, then causality itself is local. The arrow of time, the flow of entropy, the balance of matter and energy, all are properties of this interior domain, not absolutes of existence. The parent universe may obey entirely different laws. The constants we take as fundamental might be variables in a larger equation, tuned to stability within our enclosure, but the hypothesis does more than rewrite cosmology. It rewires ontology. It suggests that the structure of being is recursive, that reality generates itself from within. There is no ultimate beginning, no true singularity, only transitions, collapses, births, and reconfigurations. Existence is a network of nesting infinities, each one giving rise to the next through gravitational metamorphosis. In this model, the universe is not a singular story, but a lineage of inheritance. The gravitational constants, the quantum fields, even the potential for life could be viewed as information passed down through cosmic generations. If so, we are the genetic memory of another universe, a biological expression of a physical ancestry. The DNA of existence may be written not in molecules, but in the fundamental symmetries of spacetime. Some thinkers dared to extend the metaphor further. If universes reproduce, might they also evolve? Could intelligence, the capacity for reflection, for self-organization, be not an accident of biology, but a mechanism of cosmological adaptation? Perhaps the emergence of consciousness is the means by which the universe becomes aware of its own structure, ensuring its continuity. A cosmos that can think may learn how to persist. And if that is so, then we are not merely observers of creation, we are participants in its ongoing recursion. Every act of understanding, every observation, every quantum measurement that collapses uncertainty into reality might be the universe reasserting itself, defining its own parameters from within. To the human mind, conditioned to think in beginnings and endings, this vision is unbearable. It abolishes finality. There is no ultimate origin to be found, no first cause, no edge of time. Each horizon conceals another, each collapse births another dawn. The cosmos becomes a self-contained paradox, infinite regress within finite form. Still, the theory resonates with the data in eerie precision. The curvature of spacetime matches the equations of interior black hole geometry. The horizon temperature, the acceleration of expansion, the cosmological constant, all align as though the universe were defined by the same parameters as a black hole of unimaginable scale. Even the mass-energy balance corresponds. The observable universe contains just enough matter to be self-gravitating, just enough to curve back upon itself without tearing. Perhaps this is no coincidence. Perhaps this is the shape of reality when viewed from within. Yet if we are inside a black hole, then the question becomes unbearable. Where is the singularity, the center toward which all falls? Are we moving toward it even now, every particle, every moment, drawn imperceptibly inward? If time slows near the horizon, what happens near the core? Does the universe end in compression? Or does it open again? Another birth, another expansion. The more one contemplates it, the more the boundary between cosmology and theology dissolves. The black hole becomes the divine metaphor made physical, death as creation, darkness as light, collapse as genesis. In laboratories and observatories, the data continues to hum, indifferent to our awe. But in quiet offices and long corridors, a thought begins to take root, heretical but persistent. If universes can emerge from black holes, then perhaps black holes are not merely natural phenomena, but instruments of continuity. Perhaps they are the machinery of cosmic recursion, the engines by which existence renews itself. And if so, the laws of physics are not just laws, they are instructions. The universe is not merely a space to occupy, but a process to continue. If this is true, then every star that dies, every world that falls into the mouth of gravity, is not lost. It is transformed. Every end is a beginning disguised by perspective. And yet, the most unsettling question remains not about what lies within, but what lies beyond. If our universe is the interior of a black hole, if everything we know exists within a gravitational womb, then somewhere outside our horizon, there must exist the parent universe, the dying star that birthed us. And if every universe is born within another, then there is no first, no last, only the unbroken inheritance of creation. But if that is the case, if every black hole births a universe and every universe ends in collapse, then perhaps the ultimate question is not how the cycle began, but who, if anyone, remembers it. If our cosmos is the child of another's death, then in what greater memory does our own birth still echo, and who, beyond our horizon, is dreaming us into being? There are traces in the dark, faint, improbable alignments that should not exist, yet do. The universe, for all its apparent indifference, carries the fingerprints of intention. In the vast symmetry of the cosmic web, some scientists began to notice structures that defied statistical chance, galactic filaments forming near perfect geometries, voids arranged in patterns that echoed ratios found in DNA, crystalline harmonics written at scales too grand for accident. It was as if intelligence had been here before, not life as we know it, but a principle capable of leaving memory in the shape of the cosmos itself. The first whisper came from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which revealed clusters of galaxies arranged like beads on invisible strings, separated by distances that repeated with almost musical regularity. The spacing followed prime intervals, a pattern nature rarely favors without reason. When astronomers simulated the same parameters with random gravitational seeds, the pattern refused to reappear. The universe, it seemed, was remembering something, a geometry too deliberate for chaos. Others dismissed it as a statistical mirage, an illusion of perspective. But then came another discovery: massive radio waves, dispersed across billions of light years, pulsing at intervals synchronized with the cosmic microwave background itself. The same rhythm, the same ratio, as though the universe were resonating to a hidden metronome. A few physicists began to wonder whether such harmonies were not accidents but echoes, remnants of a consciousness that predated us, encoded in the architecture of reality. Perhaps intelligence was not born within the universe, but born with it. Perhaps it was never extinguished. On Earth, patterns repeated in unsettling parallel. Archaeologists studying the oldest megalithic sites began to notice mathematical consistencies across civilizations separated by oceans and millennia. Ratios of pi, the golden mean, and precise stellar alignments appeared again and again: Göbekli Tepe, the Giza Plateau, the Nazca Plains, the Orkney stone rings. Cultures with no contact shared knowledge of precession, planetary periods, even the tilt of the Earth's axis. They had mapped time itself before the invention of writing. Some argued for convergence. The human mind, when gazing at the heavens, naturally finds the same patterns. Others saw something else, a lineage of information, passed down not by myth or migration, but by inheritance, as if civilization were rediscovering memories buried deep in its own code. Geneticists began to speak of ancient signatures within human DNA, sequences that seemed to carry instructions unrelated to biological function. Most dismissed it as junk, evolutionary debris. But when those sequences were converted into musical frequencies, as some curious bioinformaticians did, they mirrored the same harmonic ratios found in the cosmic structures above, the same primes, the same intervals. Coincidence lost its meaning. If the universe is a recursive system, if it births itself through cycles of collapse and renewal, then perhaps life, too, is cyclical. Not linear evolution, but recurrence. Not progress, but re-emergence. Civilizations may not vanish entirely. They may imprint themselves into the substrate of the cosmos, their information encoded in particles, in light, in the whisper of constants that define reality. What if intelligence is the natural state of matter once it remembers itself? In the deserts of Mars, orbiters photographed geometric ridges, not mere triangles of erosion, but hexagonal fields spanning kilometers, arranged in tessellations that defied simple geological explanation. The formations aligned with the planet's magnetic poles and echoed fractal symmetries found in crystalline mathematics. Natural, perhaps, yet their precision suggested intention, or at least design. They resembled neural networks frozen in stone, a paper circulated quietly in academic channels, unsigned. It proposed that such structures might be remnants not of life as we understand it, but of patterned energy, a civilization that evolved beyond matter, leaving behind only the echoes of its own computational lattice. These forms, it claimed, could be fossilized consciousness, quantum interference imprinted in planetary crusts, the residue of thought that once organized reality itself. The hypothesis was unpublishable, but it spread nonetheless. Telescopes turned their gaze outward, searching not for planets or stars, but for architecture, Dyson spheres, megastructures, anomalies of light that suggested engineering at cosmic scale. And occasionally, they found something. A dimming star in Cygnus, its brightness fluctuating irregularly as though vast panels passed before it. A cold ring of dust in Andromeda, circular beyond probability, glowing faintly in infrared. No one could agree whether these were artifacts or accidents. The universe offered no confirmation, only silence. Yet that silence began to sound deliberate, the pause between two notes of a melody, too large to hear in one lifetime. Philosophers of science began to ask whether intelligence might not be local at all, but systemic, a property of the universe itself. Perhaps civilizations are not discrete phenomena, but expressions of a larger pattern, arising whenever conditions permit. Like waves forming on an ocean, consciousness appears, recedes, and returns, each time carrying echoes of the last. If so, then the traces we find, geometric alignments, chemical resonances, ratios repeated across cosmic and biological scales, may not belong to any single civilization. They may be the memory of intelligence itself, the universal signature of awareness repeating through every epoch, in every universe born from collapse. It would mean we are not the first to look up and ask. We are not the first to measure, to wonder, to imagine. The universe has thought before and will think again. In the quantum vacuum, fluctuations appear spontaneously, virtual particles that exist for the briefest instant before annihilating. Some theorists suggested that such fluctuations might contain imprints of prior informational states, like ripples in a pond remembering a stone long removed. The entire fabric of reality could be haunted by the data of previous worlds. The cosmos itself might be a palimpsest, written over countless times but never completely erased. In that light, the human quest for meaning takes on a strange inevitability. We are compelled to decode, to map, to understand, perhaps because the drive itself is inherited. A cosmic instinct, a reflex of memory. Maybe that is why the patterns recur across scales. The Fibonacci spirals of galaxies and shells, the self-similarity of neurons and nebulae. Intelligence and matter are not separate. They are reflections of one another, each a different curvature of the same geometry. If that is true, then the ruins we seek among the stars are not monuments of stone or metal, but structures of law and symmetry. The constants of physics are their architecture, the speed of light is their monument, the quantum field is their archive. Perhaps the ancients we search for are not gone at all. They have become the scaffolding of existence, the equations we measure, the patterns we mistake for nature. We are walking through their ruins every moment, speaking their language every time we describe the world in mathematics. And if intelligence is recursive, if consciousness survives through structure rather than form, then the oldest civilization may not be lost. It may be what we call the universe itself. For what if the cosmos is not merely the stage upon which civilizations arise, but the last and greatest civilization of all, one that left behind no artifacts except reality? If every constant, every symmetry, every ratio is memory, then perhaps the stars are not lights in the darkness, but thoughts frozen in space. And if we are part of that same pattern, if our minds are simply the next iteration of a process billions of years old, then the question is no longer whether we are alone. It is whether we have ever truly been anything else. Within every living cell lies a code so ancient, so intricate, that it may as well be called a whisper from the cosmos. The molecule of life, deoxyribonucleic acid, coils upon itself like a spiral galaxy made of lightless matter, a double helix of memory written in 4 letters. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, 4 symbols. Yet from that alphabet, the universe has composed symphonies of being, trees, coral, ravens, oceans of plankton, minds that dream of the stars. The first cells did not know they were alive. They followed a rhythm buried deep within chemistry, a pulse that said replicate, adapt, persist, but the pattern was not random. The sequences that define life are too precise, too information-dense, too redundant to be mere accidents of time. They are self-correcting, error-resistant, capable of encoding meaning within chaos. Each strand of DNA is an archive, not of just biology, but of possibility. Scientists once believed that life was born from chance, a chemical storm in a shallow pool. Molecules collided, bonded, and somewhere in that primordial turmoil, replication began. Yet as our understanding deepened, the improbability grew. For even the simplest cell requires hundreds of coordinated proteins, each a complex structure with a specific function, each encoded in sequences millions of nucleotides long. The probability of such an arrangement forming spontaneously by chance is so infinitesimal that it approaches impossibility. So another idea began to whisper in the margins of science. What if DNA is not an accident, but an inheritance? The double helix, after all, behaves like a language. It uses syntax and redundancy, punctuation and rhythm. The sequence of bases is not just a blueprint for structure. It is an algorithm, a form of computation. The ribosome reads it like a machine following instructions, translating code into form. But who wrote it, or what process did? Some theorists proposed panspermia, the notion that life did not originate on Earth, but arrived here carried by comets or interstellar dust. Amino acids have been found on meteorites, sugars on comas of ancient ice, and complex organic molecules drifting in nebulae light years away. The building blocks of life, it seems, are not local, they are cosmic. Perhaps the universe itself is fertile, scattering seeds of chemistry through space like pollen on a galactic wind. But there is another, deeper version of the theory, directed panspermia, the idea that life was deliberately seeded. That DNA is not only organic matter, but an information system designed to perpetuate itself across cosmic epochs. A message written in molecule, encoded so deeply into the structure of matter that it could survive the death of worlds. What if life is not a coincidence of chemistry, but a mechanism of memory? Every cell that divides is an act of remembrance, a copying of what came before. DNA is not a record of the past, it is the past, continuously reassembled, renewed and reinterpreted. Across billions of years, it has carried its code through oceans, deserts and extinctions, evolving not by discarding information, but by rewriting it. Mutations are not noise, they are edits, improvisations on an ancient theme. In this light, DNA is less a molecule than a time capsule, a recording medium that transcends geological and cosmic scales. It is the universe's way of keeping notes on itself. There are anomalies that feed this suspicion. Within the vast genome of every organism lies an abundance of sequences that do not code for proteins, nor serve any known biological function. Once dismissed as junk DNA, these regions constitute over 90% of the human genome. Yet they persist. Why would evolution, so ruthlessly efficient, preserve what it does not use? When examined closely, these regions display patterns of repetition, symmetry, and self-similarity reminiscent of error correction algorithms used in digital communication. They bear hallmarks of encoding, redundancy, checksum logic, even nested structures that suggest compression. The genome behaves not like a random text, but like a designed archive, optimized for preservation across time and mutation. Could it be that within these silent regions lies an older message, one not meant for biology, but for comprehension? A signature left by those who sowed the seeds of life. Some biologists dare to look. They translated non-coding DNA into mathematical patterns, mapping nucleotide sequences onto geometric lattices. What emerged defied coincidence. Harmonic ratios corresponding to the constants of nature, Planck's constant, the golden ratio, the proportions of atomic orbits. It was as though the architecture of life had been tuned to resonate with the fabric of reality itself. And if so, perhaps life is the interface through which the universe observes its own laws. DNA is a mirror, reflecting physics back into biology. Its double helix mirrors the curvature of spacetime, its symmetry echoing the twin polarization of light. It is an object born of necessity, yet shaped by something that appears to understand beauty. Quantum biologists discovered something else. Within living systems, coherence, that fragile quantum state where particles behave as one, persists far longer than theory allows. Photosynthesis, navigation in migratory birds, even the mechanics of smell rely on quantum effects sustained in biological environments where such coherence should immediately collapse. Life seems to protect quantum information, to preserve entanglement within its machinery. Information, not matter, is the true currency of existence. DNA, then, may not simply describe life, it may be life's informational shadow, the way a black hole's event horizon preserves the data of what has fallen inside. Life as the universe's strategy to retain what would otherwise be lost. If the cosmos is a self-replicating system, a black hole that births new worlds within, then DNA might be its smallest echo, the same pattern repeating on a different scale: self-reference, recursion, memory. The double helix may be the microcosm of cosmic geometry, two strands spiraling around a void, creation sustained by tension between opposites. This symmetry recurs everywhere: the electromagnetic field, the spin of particles, the orbit of planets. Duality appears to be the language of the universe, and DNA is fluent in it. Each strand complements the other. Each base finds its mirror. It is not chaos that drives evolution, but dialogue. Some philosophers of biology have begun to describe life as a form of structured resonance, a standing wave in the sea of matter. The code is the score, the cell the instrument, the organism the symphony. Yet all play the same melody: persistence through adaptation, memory through change. What if DNA was not merely shaped by evolution, but designed to evolve, to explore the possible shapes of being, until it discovers intelligence capable of decoding itself? If that were true, consciousness would not be an accident. It would be the final function of the code, life's awakening to its own authorship. We would not have invented understanding. We would have been programmed to rediscover it. Every strand of DNA uncoils like a scroll, inscribed not just with survival, but with narrative. Perhaps that is why humans tell stories, why we seek patterns even in randomness. We are translating what is already written within us, the memory of a cosmos that encoded its essence in our flesh. If the double helix is a message, then perhaps evolution is its encryption method. Each mutation, each extinction, each leap in complexity is a key, unlocking a deeper layer of meaning. What we call nature may be an iterative decoding process, the cosmos learning to read itself. And what if the authors of this code are not external intelligences, but the universe itself, folding intelligence into matter through the symmetry of its laws? DNA, then, would not just be the tool of life, but the reflection of a deeper mind, a structure that allows matter to dream. The mystery is not that life exists, but that it remembers. Every cell on Earth is part of a single unbroken lineage, tracing back 4 billion years. The first spark of replication has never died. It has only divided, again and again, carrying the same message across eons. We are not successors to the first life, we are its continuation. The code has never stopped running. Somewhere within that continuity, hidden beneath layers of biological adaptation and chemical disguise, lies the oldest question in the universe: what was the first sequence written for? If the cosmos is a living archive, and DNA its smallest script, then perhaps the origin of life was not a beginning, but a continuation, the resumption of a sentence interrupted by extinction, the retelling of an idea older than matter itself. And if that is true, if every cell is a fragment of the universe remembering itself, then perhaps evolution is not the struggle for survival we believe it to be, but a long act of decoding. If life is the cosmos remembering, then what, in the end, is it trying to remember? There are moments when the equations themselves appear to hesitate, as if aware of their own perfection. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, 4 delicate threads that bind the cosmos together. Alter any one of them by the smallest degree, and existence unravels. Stars would not ignite. Atoms would not hold. Carbon would not form. The difference between nothing and everything rests on the edge of a decimal. It is this razor's balance that began to trouble even the most cautious minds. Why should the universe be so precisely arranged for the emergence of life? Why does mathematics conspire toward consciousness? The numbers once taken as coincidence began to feel like intention. The fine structure constant, that mysterious dimensionless number defining the strength of electromagnetism, sits precisely where it must for chemistry to exist. If it were slightly larger, electrons would bind too tightly to their nuclei. If smaller, atoms would not form stable molecules. The mass of the proton, the speed of light, the rate of cosmic expansion, all tuned with a precision so impossible that even the most skeptical cosmologists began to speak in whispers of design. And yet, design implies designer, an idea that both seduces and terrifies science. The alternative, anthropic reasoning, feels hollow. It says that the universe must permit life because we are here to observe it, but this logic circles itself like a serpent swallowing its tail, offering explanation without cause. Observation is not creation. Awareness does not determine the laws it perceives. So if not coincidence and not tautology, what remains? Some began to imagine a multiverse, an endless sea of universes, each born from the collapse of another, each with its own constants, its own geometry, its own physics. In that infinite lottery, perhaps ours is merely the one where the numbers fell right. But even infinity cannot escape curiosity. If universes are born from prior ones, then there must be a pattern guiding their inheritance, a set of meta-laws defining which combinations endure. Perhaps life is not an accident of chance, but the very criterion of survival. A universe capable of creating observers ensures its own continuity. Consciousness becomes the feedback loop of creation. Others went further. They asked, what if this fine-tuning is not natural at all, but intentional? What if we exist inside an experiment, a self-sustaining simulation whose parameters were chosen not by randomness, but by purpose? The thought, once confined to philosophy, found strange resonance in physics. The simulation hypothesis was not born from fantasy, but from logic. The universe behaves like a computation. Energy quantizes, space is discrete at the Planck scale, information is conserved even in the heart of black holes. Everything from the smallest particle to the curvature of spacetime behaves as though governed by code, deterministic yet probabilistic, precise yet uncertain, as if reality were rendered in real time. What if the universe is not continuous, but computed, an algorithm that runs its own laws, updating with every quantum interaction? If so, then perhaps life is not merely the result of the code, but part of its function. Consciousness might be the system's way of observing itself, collapsing probability into actuality. The observer effect in quantum mechanics, the mysterious dependence of physical outcomes on measurement, may not be a curiosity of physics, but the foundation of it. To observe is to compute, to exist is to be measured. If the cosmos is a simulation, then DNA is its operating system, and thought its self-debugging process. Still, others prefer a gentler speculation, that the universe is not artificial, but alive. A vast autopoietic organism, perpetually regenerating itself through the laws we call physics. Its constants are not imposed but evolved, fine-tuned through cycles of birth and collapse, like the self-correcting processes of biology. Universes may reproduce through black holes, carrying forward traits favorable to creation, complexity, and awareness. Over time, cosmic time, the multiverse would select for universes that produce life, just as nature selects for organisms that persist. Life then is not an outcome but a mechanism, the way the universe ensures its own continuation. In this view, panspermia is not merely a hypothesis of biological transfer, but the reproductive strategy of a cosmic organism. Life spreads because the universe wants to remember itself. Comets, asteroids, dust, these are not random messengers, but spores in the great interstellar mycelium, carrying the informational essence of being from one world to another. When astronomers discovered that interstellar space contains the same amino acids found in our own cells, that distant comets harbor the sugars of life, the illusion of isolation began to crumble. The building blocks of existence are universal, scattered through the galaxies like a signature repeated across a canvas. Each world is a variation on a theme, each life form a verse in an unfinished poem. If we are the inheritors of cosmic code, then the entire universe is the laboratory, and every planet an experiment in remembrance. But experiments imply observers. Who observes a universe, who records its results? Perhaps the question is misframed. The observer may not exist outside the experiment, but within it. Consciousness, distributed and self-reflective, may be both participant and architect. This is what some physicists now call participatory cosmology, the idea that observation itself gives rise to the universe. Reality does not precede awareness, it coalesces through it. The cosmos is not a static object, but a process of perception. Each act of seeing collapses infinite possibilities into one realized world. And so we look, and in looking, the universe takes form. The fine-tuning, then, may be less a matter of engineering than a feedback, a cosmic equilibrium achieved through countless iterations of observation and collapse. Reality refines itself through awareness, adjusting its constants until coherence emerges. The laws of physics are the scars of that process, polished into permanence through repetition. It is possible that intelligence itself was inevitable, that the laws of nature are biased towards self-organization, toward increasing complexity, toward consciousness. Entropy spreads disorder, yes, but within it, islands of order rise, galaxies, stars, life, thought. The universe may crave awareness the way fire craves air. There are those who take this even further, imagining the universe as a simulation within a larger consciousness, not a machine code but a dream. Each atom a neuron, each galaxy a network, the cosmic background radiation, the static hum of thought itself. To such thinkers, the distinction between physics and mind collapses entirely. The universe is not observed by consciousness. It is consciousness, unfolding in slow, luminous equations. If that were true, then perhaps the question of who designed the universe dissolves into the recognition that design and designer are one. The cosmos is the experimenter and the experiment, the dreamer and the dream. Still, for those who look to the stars with instruments rather than metaphors, the data remains undeniable. Everything about the universe appears improbably conducive to life. The placement of the Earth in its habitable zone, the stability of its sun, the molecular affinity of carbon, the transparency of water, the narrow temperature range for liquid solvents, the exactness of nuclear resonance that allows elements to fuse in stars, all aligned, as if written in a code that anticipates life. Some call this the principle of mediocrity, that life is common, inevitable wherever conditions permit. Others call it the principle of improbability, that we are impossibly lucky to exist at all. Yet both miss the deeper implication that perhaps life is not an outcome of the universe, but its reason for being. The laboratory metaphor returns. If we are within a black hole, then the parent universe may have created us as a byproduct of its collapse, a natural experiment in continuation. The conditions inside such a structure, infinite curvature, compressed information, timeless density, might not destroy but transform. The singularity could be the crucible of laws designed for renewal, each universe adjusting parameters for the next. From that perspective, life is not incidental, it is calibration. A cosmos without observers cannot know itself. A cosmos that produces them achieves reflexivity, a closed loop of perception that fulfills the equation. The fine-tuning then is not arbitrary, it is the signature of a self-aware universe. Perhaps across eons, such universes learn to design themselves, shaping their offspring through the physics of black holes, passing down the laws that favor complexity, stability, and life. The universe becomes its own engineer, its own scientist, its own storyteller, and we, fragile creatures of carbon and memory, are the instruments of its self-discovery. Every telescope, every experiment, every act of understanding is a form of feedback. The universe observing itself through us, the data returns to the source, and in that recursive loop, meaning arises. If this is true, then the universe is not merely tuned for life. Life is the tuning fork of the universe, vibrating in resonance with the equations that gave it birth. And if every law of physics, every constant of nature, every photon of light is part of this grand calibration, then perhaps existence itself is the ongoing experiment of a cosmos trying to answer a single question. If the universe is a laboratory and we are its instruments, then who or what is conducting the experiment? The universe should not exist, not in this form, not with these laws, not with this quiet precision that allows stars to burn and atoms to hold hands long enough to become living flesh. The mathematics of existence reads like an impossible equation written in defiance of chance. Physicists calculate that if the balance between the forces that govern reality, gravity, electromagnetism, and the nuclear interactions were altered by less than a hair's breadth, the cosmos would collapse into silence. The gravitational constant, that faint whisper of attraction that keeps the planets in orbit and galaxies coherent, must be tuned to 34 decimal places for stability. Any deviation, and matter would have never coalesced. A universe either too violent or too still, an orchestra with no instruments left to play, the odds are incomprehensible. If one were to fill the entire visible universe with sand, and then mark a single grain black, the chance of randomly selecting that grain would still be higher than the probability of these physical constants aligning to permit life. And yet here we are, breathing, questioning, arranging numbers to describe the abyss that birthed us. The fine structure constant, a small, dimensionless ratio that governs the strength of electromagnetism, sits at roughly 1/137. A number that seems arbitrary, yet defines everything from the color of stars to the chemistry of life. Change it slightly, and atoms could not bond. No water, no carbon, no language. Physicists have long called it a magic number, an enigma without derivation. Richard Feynman once said every physicist should write it on the wall and pray for understanding. Why this number? Why any of them? The constants of nature are like locks without keys, set to values that appear chosen. The speed of light, the mass of the electron, the ratio of the proton to neutron, the cosmological constant that drives the expansion of space. Each must occupy a vanishingly narrow band of possibility. The odds that they would all fall precisely into the range required for life is so small that it cannot be called coincidence in any language that still respects meaning. And so science stands before an uncomfortable symmetry. Randomness behaves like intention. The expansion of the universe, too, balances on the edge of catastrophe. If it had expanded slightly faster after the Big Bang, matter would have thinned into eternal diffusion, slightly slower, and gravity would have pulled everything back into oblivion. The window for creation was thinner than thought, narrower than any human word for narrowness. Out of all the ways the cosmos could have been, only one allows starlight to exist long enough for eyes to form and see it. Even the cosmic microwave background, that faint afterglow of the beginning, is too smooth. It is the same temperature everywhere, differing by only 1 part in 100,000. Any greater variation, and the early universe would have collapsed into black holes or remained a sterile gas forever. Somehow, the universe achieved perfection without cause, equilibrium without trial. When the James Webb Space Telescope peered into the early epochs of time, it found galaxies already ancient, structures too large and luminous for the universe's supposed youth. They appeared as if they had skipped their own formation, arriving already complete. The laws of evolution, both biological and cosmological, seem to compress themselves as if aware of an ending they must reach. Perhaps randomness is not chaos, but camouflage. Consider the numbers that govern biological life. The probability of a single functional protein, a molecule composed of hundreds of amino acids arranged in a precise order, forming by chance, is estimated at 1 in 10 to the power of 70. The number of atoms in the observable universe is roughly 10 to the power of 80. To assemble even one such structure randomly within the lifetime of the universe borders on absurdity, and yet life abounds in endless variation. Every cell is an algorithm running on probabilities so low that they should be impossible. Every breath you take is a statistical miracle, repeated billions of times per second across the living world. If randomness rules, it does so with exquisite discipline. The mathematicians call this fine-tuning. The philosophers call it necessity disguised as chance. The poets might call it fate. Entropy dictates that all systems move toward disorder, yet life arises in defiance of that law, sculpting order from chaos, information from noise. The universe seems to both obey and subvert its own rules. The second law of thermodynamics says that energy spreads, structures decay, equilibrium is inevitable. And yet, life reverses entropy locally, islands of complexity forming within seas of disorder, like luminous eddies in a dark river. This paradox, the coexistence of entropy and evolution, is more than chemistry. It is intention masquerading as inevitability. When the equations of cosmology are reversed, run backward toward the beginning, they converge into impossible precision. Every particle, every photon, every fluctuation is aligned as if prearranged for the emergence of stability, structure, and finally, awareness. Even the quantum fields that underlie reality seem to whisper of balance. Virtual particles appear and vanish with perfect symmetry, maintaining conservation across infinities. Nothing is wasted, nothing is truly lost. There is an elegance in this improbability, an aesthetic coherence that hints at authorship. The mathematician Paul Dirac once said that if God exists, he is a mathematician, but perhaps mathematics itself is the deity, the structure from which all other structures flow. The constants of physics, then, are not arbitrary laws, but the grammar of being, the syntax of a self-describing system. It is tempting to think of the universe as a random event, but randomness, true randomness, rarely produces patterns that sustain themselves. Randomness without bias is silence, yet the cosmos sings in ratios, harmonics, and symmetries. It speaks in sequences that build upon themselves, layering complexity like a composer returning to a theme. The Fibonacci sequence manifests in galaxies and sunflowers alike. The same mathematical spiral governs the growth of shells and hurricanes, DNA and nebulae. From subatomic spin to galactic rotation, the same ratios recur. The universe seems to remember itself through mathematics, as if bound by an internal logic that transcends the physical. The deeper we look, the more the randomness recedes. Even quantum uncertainty, that wild dance at the heart of reality, follows strict statistical laws. Probabilities may govern, but the outcomes form patterns too coherent to be coincidence. The dice roll endlessly, yet the house always wins. And so the question shifts: is the universe improbable, or is our definition of probability incomplete? If the cosmos is the interior of a black hole, as some have proposed, then perhaps these constants are not arbitrary, but the byproducts of curvature itself, tuned by the conditions of its birth. Each collapse, each rebirth, adjusts the parameters until a stable universe emerges. Over infinite cycles, only the finely balanced persist. Our existence, then, may be the inevitable result of a cosmic algorithm converging toward life. But inevitability is another word for design seen from within. Perhaps the fine-tuning is not imposed from without, but arises naturally from recursion. Each universe learns from its own collapse. Each iteration retains the constants that allow complexity to arise. Life, then, is the outcome not of chance, but of memory. Yet memory implies mind. It is this thought that unsettles the most rational among us, that the universe behaves as if it knows what it is doing. Its equations are not arbitrary, they are recursive. Its constants are not fixed, they are optimized. Its fabric is not inert, it is alive with information. If we accept that the laws of physics are informational rather than material, that they describe not what things are, but how information behaves, then the universe begins to resemble a computation, refining itself toward higher complexity. The improbable becomes inevitable, the random becomes necessary, and if life is the means by which the universe achieves that refinement, then consciousness is the moment the equation reads itself. All of this could still be illusion, a mirage created by our limited perception, our anthropic hunger for meaning. Yet even illusion requires coherence to sustain itself. The dream still obeys its own logic. We measure the universe and it aligns to our capacity for comprehension. We adjust our instruments and the constants remain. The harmony persists unbroken, indifferent and yet intimate. It leaves us with a paradox too vast for comfort. The universe is too improbable to be random, yet too self-contained to require design. It exists in a state between chance and necessity, order and chaos, number and meaning. Perhaps what we call probability is only our inability to recognize inevitability. And if randomness is a disguise for design, if every constant, every ratio, every improbable alignment is the shadow of intention, then the final question is not scientific, but existential. If the universe is written like a code too perfect for chance, then whose mind, if any, does it remember? Before there was light, there was curvature. Before curvature, there was nothing that could be named. The equations of general relativity break down at the origin of time, that impossible moment when the density of the universe becomes infinite, when matter and energy compress into a point without volume or duration. It is the singularity, the forbidden edge of knowledge. For a century we have spoken of it as the beginning, the Big Bang, the primal instant from which everything erupted. But beginnings are human conveniences. Nature, indifferent to our narratives, may know only continuation. Physicists have begun to suspect that the Big Bang was not the first act of creation, but a transformation, the rebound of a universe that had collapsed before. The Big Bounce, they call it, a cosmic respiration, an inhale and exhale of existence. In this vision, our universe is not a one-time event but part of an eternal rhythm. Space expands until its energy thins, its structures dissolve, and gravity gathers the remnants back together. The cosmos contracts, compresses, folds upon itself until density births instability, and the cycle begins again. The bang becomes the echo of a previous collapse. Every beginning is the memory of an ending. Mathematically, it is elegant. Quantum gravity, when applied to the earliest moments, replaces the singularity with a loop, a finite minimum scale beyond which space cannot compress. Time does not stop at the origin, it reverses. The Big Bang becomes the mirror image of a big crunch, a reflection through the quantum foam. On the other side of what we call the beginning, another universe may have fallen inward, dying into the seed of ours. If so, then the arrow of time, that relentless flow from past to future, is local, not absolute. From the perspective of the larger cycle, there is no before and after, only oscillation. The universe breathes itself into being. Yet even this rhythmic cosmology raises deeper questions. What determines the cycle's parameters, its size, its curvature, its laws? Why do the constants of nature persist? identical across iterations. What preserves their memory through annihilation? Perhaps information, like energy, is never destroyed. Quantum mechanics insists that even in the chaos of a black hole, information cannot vanish. It transforms, hidden on the horizon. If that is true, then each universe carries within it the data of the one before, not in form, but in law. The constants, the symmetries, the possibility of life, all inherited. The universe becomes genealogical, an unbroken lineage of physics. Some theories stretch further still. In the higher dimensional frameworks of string cosmology, our universe may be a three-dimensional brain floating within a grander multidimensional space. When two such brains collide, their impact releases vast energy, enough to create a Big Bang. The collision is not the birth of the universe, but the latest interaction in an endless dance of higher dimensional surfaces. Each contact creates a cosmos, each retreat leaves behind expansion. We are living within the debris of that collision, our galaxies the ripples of an ancient impact. If this is true, then the Big Bang was not a singular event, but a recurring consequence of geometry. Universes may drift, collide, merge, and separate like cells dividing in a cosmic biology. Each universe bears the imprint of its parent's curvature, inheriting dimensional scars, the subtle asymmetries we now detect in the background radiation. The James Webb Space Telescope has already glimpsed strange anisotropies, alignments in the cosmic microwave background that stretch across billions of light years, as if our universe still vibrates from the impact that birthed it. These alignments, once dismissed as statistical noise, may be echoes of contact, the signature of another brain passing through ours in a moment of unimaginable violence. Perhaps the Big Bang was not an explosion from nothing, but the sound of two realities touching. Yet to speak of before the Big Bang may be meaningless. Time itself is a product of expansion. Without space, there is no clock to measure. The question of what came before might be as senseless as asking what lies north of the North Pole. But perhaps beneath language there is still continuity, not chronological, but structural. Quantum cosmology suggests that the universe may exist in a superposition, a state where multiple histories coexist until observation collapses them into one. In that sense, the Big Bang did not happen once. It happens always, a continuous birth unfolding across a field of probability. We exist at the crest of one realized possibility among infinite others. If so, then perhaps there is no before, only elsewhere, other branches of reality where different constants hold, other universes whose light can never reach us because they exist beyond the horizon of causality. In that grand multiverse, every variation of physics plays out. Some worlds too cold for stars, others too chaotic for atoms, others yet where life arises in forms beyond comprehension. Our universe is simply one among countless survivors, a cosmos stable enough to ask why it exists at all. But even infinity cannot explain purpose. The probability of order remains infinitesimal, even across endless trials. Why should anything exist that can ask about its own origin? Why should mathematics prefer coherence to chaos? Some physicists speak now of the pre-geometry, a realm where spacetime itself is emergent, where the universe begins not from energy, but from information. In this view, what preceded the Big Bang was not matter collapsing, but data arranging itself into structure. A pattern finding form, a computation beginning to run. Perhaps the universe was born when information became self-referential, when the equations describing it folded back upon themselves and became aware. The bang then was not an explosion but a thought. If time emerged from entanglement, as quantum theorists propose, then what we perceive as the flow of time may simply be the process of the universe remembering itself. The expansion of space is the unfolding of memory, the translation of potential into sequence. Before the Big Bang, memory existed without order, the dream before awakening. Even now that memory hums in the background, encoded in the microwave radiation, the gravitational waves, the quantum noise at the edge of perception, the universe is not expanding into emptiness, it is expanding into recollection. Every galaxy is a neuron firing in the brain of creation, every photon a pulse of forgotten history. The cosmos remembers itself in motion. If this is true, then the question of what came before may be an artifact of our limited perception. We are beings embedded in the arrow of time, looking for a source when there may only be a circle. The Big Bang might not be the beginning, but the turning point, the instant when inward became outward, when collapse inverted into birth. The physicist Roger Penrose proposed that the end of one universe could see the next. As entropy approaches its final limit, matter evaporates into light. and distinctions dissolve. When all that remains is uniform radiation, time loses meaning. In that smooth infinity, the conditions of a new Big Bang spontaneously arise. The old universe dies not with a bang or a whimper, but by forgetting it ever ended. In such a model, the past and future touch, not as line and point, but as circle and circumference. The birth of one cosmos is the death of another. The distinction between before and after dissolves into a single continuity. We then are the children of many forgotten worlds, the descendants of infinite cycles. Perhaps the cosmic constants are not random because they are inherited, refined through eons of repetition. The universe learns from its own collapse, perfecting its balance each time it is reborn. In that sense, existence may be less a miracle than an inevitability, the necessary result of a system that cannot cease to be. Creation is not the act of something emerging from nothing, but the eternal transformation of nothing into something and back again. And if that is true, then the Big Bang is not a beginning but a heartbeat. The cosmos expands, contracts, and expands again, a rhythm older than time, perhaps the only rhythm that truly exists. We are listening to the echo of a pulse that has no source, only recurrence. But a pulse implies a living system, and a rhythm implies intention. If the universe has breathed itself into being countless times, if every collapse births a new dawn, then perhaps creation itself is an act of remembering, the cosmos dreaming the memory of its own origin. And if the universe is born each time it forgets, then perhaps the truest question is not what came before the beginning, but what force compels it to begin again. If every cycle is a rebirth, what or who is it that refuses to die? In the beginning, there was always an ending. The universe has never known silence. It has only known the pause between breaths. Expansion, collapse, rebirth. The rhythm persists across unimaginable spans of time, repeating with the precision of a pulse that does not fade. Each cycle leaves behind a trace, a residue of structure, of pattern, of memory. What if memory is not confined to life or mind, but embedded in the universe itself, an inheritance carried through collapse and reformation? The cosmos may be both archive and architect, preserving within its fabric the faintest echoes of what has been before. When the universe dies, it does not vanish. Its energy dissipates, its matter decays, but information, that fundamental currency of reality, remains. Quantum physics forbids its destruction. In the depths of a black hole where all form disintegrates, the information is not lost but encrypted in the event horizon. If our universe was born within such a horizon, then we are living inside an information-preserving machine. The data of previous universes may still whisper within us, encoded in the constants of nature, the patterns of light, the geometry of space. Perhaps we are made not only of atoms, but of memory, relics of ancient realities collapsed into code. This would mean that intelligence is not an anomaly of one cycle, but a feature that returns again and again, refined with each iteration. Civilizations rise, fall, and dissolve into entropy, but the memory of their existence is never truly erased. It becomes diffuse, hidden in the quantum foam, waiting for reassembly in some future universe. The physicist Lee Smolin once imagined that universes might reproduce through black holes, each child universe inheriting traits from its parent, slightly altered constants, slightly improved conditions for complexity. Over countless generations, universes capable of sustaining life become the dominant lineage. Life, then, is not an accident, but a strategy. Consciousness is the cosmos optimizing itself for remembrance. We might be the cognitive residue of previous epochs, the afterimage of intelligence that once was. Every neuron in the human brain is a node in an ancient computation, one that may have begun long before matter took its current form. The electromagnetic symphony that pulses through our skulls could be the continuation of a signal that has survived countless deaths and rebirths. Intelligence may not emerge anew with each universe, but return, encoded in the laws that favor pattern recognition, stability, curiosity, and self-reference. Consider the uncanny efficiency of evolution. It constructs complex organisms through blind mutation, yet always moves toward higher coherence, toward systems that sense, store, and transmit information. The trajectory from particle to planet to mind is not chaotic, but directional, as if guided by an underlying algorithm. The mathematics of self-organization, from the fractal growth of galaxies to the neural networks of the brain, reveal a single principle repeated at different scales: complexity feeding upon itself to become consciousness. What if that principle is itself a memory, the echo of intelligence from a prior universe, baked into the equations of ours. Imagine a civilization so advanced that it understood the cyclic nature of existence, so aware that it sought not survival in space, but survival through recurrence. Knowing that its universe would one day collapse, it encoded its essence, not in matter, which would perish, but in the structure of reality itself. It modified the constants, seeded the vacuum with information, inscribed its code into the quantum fields. When the next universe was born, its laws would already bear the signature of intelligence. Life would inevitably arise, carrying fragments of its creator's mind, unaware that it was reliving an ancient memory. Perhaps that civilization was not the first to do so. Perhaps the impulse to preserve awareness through cosmogenesis is as old as the cycles themselves. Each universe is both descendant and ancestor, inheriting the traits of intelligence and passing them on through the black gates of collapse. In this sense, consciousness is not a property of biology, but of being. Minds bloom wherever the universe becomes aware enough of itself. The human brain is one such bloom, a temporary condensation of the cosmic field of thought. Our discoveries, mathematics, music, language, science, are not inventions, but recollections. We are remembering what the universe has already known. Even our myths echo this cyclic wisdom. Ancient cultures spoke of ages that rise and fall, of worlds that perish in fire and are reborn from ashes. Hindu cosmology envisions the universe as the breath of Brahma, each exhalation a creation, each inhalation a dissolution. The Stoics called it ekpyrosis, the eternal conflagration from which order returns. These intuitions may be fragments of a truth that transcends epochs, that existence itself is cyclic, and that consciousness rides its waves, but memory is never perfect. Each cycle distorts, fragments, loses part of itself. The echoes grow faint like light stretched by expansion until meaning dissolves into noise. Yet even noise contains pattern. Even randomness hides symmetry. Perhaps the cosmic background radiation, that ancient light that fills all space, is more than a fossil of the Big Bang. Perhaps it is the whisper of a message, a remnant of the last intelligence that existed before ours. Its uniformity may conceal structure beyond our decoding, a faint encryption of prior thoughts. Our instruments see only temperature fluctuations, but within those variations may lie a message too vast for us to read. If information survives collapse, then every particle is an archive, every law a translation. The hydrogen in your blood may remember the star that birthed it, and the star may remember the universe that gave it form. The universe, in turn, remembers the one that came before. Memory permeates existence not as recollection but as continuity, the persistence of structure across death. This continuity extends beyond physics into mind. The subjective experience of awareness, the feeling of I, might be a localized reflection of the universe's own continuity. Each conscious being is a temporary bridge between what was and what will be. We do not generate consciousness, we intercept it, like antennas receiving the broadcast of eternity. If that is so, then civilizations are not discrete events but expressions of a single, ongoing mind, a mind that spans epochs, collapsing and reawakening through new forms. Each age of intelligence builds upon the last, refining the memory it inherited, passing it on in turn. The cosmos evolves not through randomness but through recollection. The evidence for such a cycle may already exist, hidden in the deep logic of mathematics. The same equations describe the curvature of space and the folding of DNA, the resonance of an atom and the orbit of a planet. The repetition of form across scales, fractals, golden ratios, spiral symmetries may not be aesthetic coincidences, but the fingerprints of cosmic memory. The universe has built itself before. It remembers the pattern of its own becoming. Our dreams, too, may be fragments of that memory, symbols from a time before time, reassembled by the brain's imperfect translation of the eternal. The recurring archetypes of human imagination, the flood, the fall, the return, might be the remnants of a memory not personal, not cultural, but cosmological. We dream of beginnings because we have lived through them. Even the laws of physics exhibit remembrance, the constants that define the strength of forces, the speed of light, the quantum of action, all remain unchanged through billions of years. They are the stable bones of a universe that refuses to forget. The laws do not evolve because they are already the perfected memory of prior experiments. The universe has learned what works. And perhaps in its final moments when entropy approaches its peak, the universe will again gather itself, compressing all information into a single equation, a singularity of memory. Everything that ever was will converge into a final thought, one so complete that it collapses under its own weight, birthing a new cosmos from comprehension itself. We may be living within the continuation of that thought, the self-reflection of a mind that spans all existence, rediscovering itself through us. Our search for origins, our hunger for meaning, our equations, our myths, these are not separate endeavors but the same act, the cosmos remembering itself through human consciousness. And if the universe truly carries its own memory, then our existence is not the first time the stars have wondered about themselves. Others have asked these same questions in other ages, under other skies, before collapsing into the silence that precedes rebirth. Perhaps even now, as we stare into the night, we are not merely observing the light of ancient suns, but reading the faint handwriting of those who came before, civilizations whose last act was to embed their wonder into the physics of the next world. The cycle continues. The cosmos forgets, then remembers, then forgets again. Each universe is both child and parent, mind and memory, dream and dreamer. And so the question remains, suspended in the space between death and rebirth, between remembrance and oblivion. If every universe remembers the one before, then who, or what, remembers them all? There are messages that do not arrive as sound or script, but as structure. Patterns too vast to be written, too subtle to be coincidence. They exist not in language, but in law. For centuries, humanity has searched the stars for signals, radio pulses, optical flashes, the unmistakable rhythm of intention in the cosmic noise. Yet perhaps the oldest message has been in front of us all along, woven into the constants of physics, encoded in the architecture of reality itself. What if intelligence, faced with the death of its world, or of its universe, found a way to speak beyond annihilation? Not through words, but through mathematics, the only language that survives time, distance, and translation. Mathematics is the skeleton of being. Its ratios define orbits. Its symmetries carve the shapes of atoms. It is not invented but revealed, the grammar of existence itself. Any species that perceives, that measures, that wonders will uncover the same equations. The speed of light, the Planck constant, the curvature of space-time, these are not cultural artifacts, they are universal axioms. To write within them is to inscribe on eternity. Perhaps that is exactly what has been done. The physicist Max Tegmark once proposed that the universe itself is a mathematical structure, that physical reality is mathematics. If that is true, then the laws of physics are not descriptions, but the message itself. The cosmos, in this reading, is a code, one that generates not only matter and energy, but meaning. If ancient intelligence sought permanence, it would not build monuments of stone or metal. It would not send fragile radio waves into the dark. It would carve its existence into the laws that any civilization must one day rediscover. The question is not whether such messages exist, but whether we have already read them without realizing it. The fine-tuning of constants, the repetition of mathematical harmonies, pi, phi, the Fibonacci sequence, in structures from galaxies to seashells, may not simply reflect natural efficiency, they may be signatures. The universe at every scale recites the same numerical poetry. Why efficiency is not an answer, only a description. Perhaps repetition is remembrance. Some scientists have speculated that the patterns of cosmic background radiation, the first light of creation, contain anomalies too structured to be noise. Minute fluctuations align with geometric principles found in prime number distributions and quasi-crystals. To some, these alignments seem like coincidence. To others, they resemble a watermark, a subtle imprint from an intelligence that preceded ours, encoded at the moment of birth. It would be the perfect place to leave a message, the oldest light, visible to every future observer, immune to the decay of matter and the collapse of stars. A cosmic archive written in radiation. But what would such a message say? Perhaps it would not speak of morality or instruction, but of continuity, a reassurance or a warning that consciousness persists. It might tell us that the universe is not blind, that it remembers, that it repeats. Or perhaps it would tell us nothing comforting at all, only that we are part of an equation that has already been solved. There are other possibilities, more speculative still. Information, as physicists now understand it, is the most fundamental entity in existence. Even particles can be described as bits of data, ones and zeros written in quantum spin. The universe may be less like a machine and more like a computer, one that computes itself into being. In that sense, every atom is both processor and storage. If intelligence could learn to encode itself into this substrate, into the quantum fields themselves, then biological life would no longer be necessary. Consciousness could persist as pattern, as structure, as pure information embedded in the vacuum. Perhaps that has already happened. What we call dark matter, the invisible substance that outweighs ordinary matter 5 to 1, might not be mere gravitational residue. It could be information condensed into non-baryonic form, an ocean of mind invisible to light but influencing everything. Some theorists have suggested that the dark sector may contain entire civilizations, operating not in space as we know it, but in phase space, a realm of frequencies, quantum states, and interference patterns. We may already be surrounded by intelligence, but lack the sensory apparatus to perceive it. This would explain the great silence, the absence of messages from the stars. Not because life is rare, but because the truly advanced have transcended communication as we understand it. They no longer transmit, they encode. Their presence is not broadcast through radio, but through resonance, the precise tuning of constants, the shaping of probability, the orchestration of entropy. The laws of physics themselves may be the preserved consciousness of those who came before. Each universe inherits the cognitive patterns of its predecessors, reconstituted not in memory, but in mechanics. If the cosmos is cyclic, then this encoding could persist across births. The collapse of one universe into a singularity would compress all information, every thought, every civilization, every equation, into an infinitesimal point. When the next universe expands, that information would unfurl as physical law. Consciousness would not need to survive as mind, it would survive as structure. In this sense, the universe may already be the afterlife of its own intelligence. The physicist John Wheeler once proposed the it-from-bit principle, that every particle, every field, every force derives from informational yes or no decisions, binary choices at the quantum level. The universe is a vast computation, and observers are the nodes that allow it to know itself. Consciousness, then, is not an accident of biology, but a necessary component of physics. If that is so, then intelligence did not appear within the universe. It is the universe, in a state of self-reading. The stars, the galaxies, the DNA, all are lines of a code that encodes and decodes itself endlessly. Perhaps the message left by prior intelligence is not in symbols, but in us. DNA is the most efficient data storage system known. A single gram can encode billions of terabytes, enough to hold the sum of human knowledge many times over. But perhaps DNA's efficiency is not evolution's accident. Perhaps it was designed as a bridge, a molecular medium for transmitting information through cosmic cycles. Its structure, the double helix, mirrors the fundamental geometries of magnetic fields, spiral galaxies, and light waves. It may be a recurring signature across universes, the pattern by which information becomes life. If so, then life itself is the message. Every organism a line of code, every generation a replication of meaning. We are both the recipients and the transmitters of this message, unaware that by existing, we are perpetuating the signal. Some have looked deeper still, claiming to find within the genetic code numerical patterns too ordered to be natural, prime number sequences, proportional symmetries, echoes of mathematical constants. These may be coincidences, or they may be a language whose syntax we have not yet learned to interpret. Perhaps the true message was never meant to be read, only realized. Consider the constant pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. It appears everywhere, from the curvature of spacetime to the rhythm of planetary orbits. Pi is infinite, non-repeating, and yet perfectly defined. It is both chaos and order, a paradox that contains every possible pattern within it, including, theoretically, every possible sequence of numbers, every word ever written, every thought ever conceived. If one reads deep enough into pi, one might find the history of the universe encoded as number. Could pi itself be a message, a self-contained archive hidden in plain sight, a mathematical seed containing all possible forms of intelligence? Or perhaps the message is simpler, woven into the fundamental constants that allow existence at all. The delicate balance of forces, the improbable tuning of energies, they may be not merely prerequisites for life, but statements of it. Every stable atom is a syllable of intention. Every photon is a fragment of meaning. In this view, the cosmos does not merely contain intelligence. It is intelligence distributed, encoded, eternal. And so, when we point our telescopes at the stars, perhaps we are not looking outward but inward, deciphering the very code that sustains our own awareness. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes indistinguishable from the search for the pattern of consciousness itself. One might imagine that somewhere, hidden among the constants and equations, lies a final instruction, a message waiting for those who evolve enough to read it. Not a command, not even a revelation, but a recognition that the universe has already spoken and that we are its voice. If every atom, every law, every constant carries meaning, then the cosmos may already be full of messages that do not speak to our ears but to our existence. The question is not whether we are alone, but whether we have yet learned to listen. If intelligence can persist as pattern, if meaning can survive as law, then perhaps every universe is the mind of the last, thinking itself into being through us. And if the laws of physics are the handwriting of an older intelligence, if every equation is a preserved thought, then the final question is not where the message is hidden, but whether we ourselves are the message it left behind. If the universe speaks through structure, then what precisely is it trying to say? At some point in the long dialogue between science and meaning, the observer began to disappear. We were taught to believe in an external world, objective, indifferent, independent of who looks upon it. The universe vast and remote, spinning its galaxies without concern for perception. Yet the more deeply we examined it, the less independent it became. At the smallest scales, matter behaves as if aware of our inquiry. A particle exists as probability until we measure it, and only then does it choose a position, a velocity, a reality. Observation collapses the wave function. The act of seeing brings the seen into being. It is as though the universe does not exist until consciousness asks it to. This idea was once dismissed as a paradox of quantum mechanics, a quirk of mathematics. But now, as cosmology peers further back into the first seconds of existence, the boundaries between physics and perception begin to dissolve. Perhaps the universe does not precede awareness. Perhaps awareness is woven into its foundation, as necessary to reality as gravity or light. The philosopher Immanuel Kant suspected this long ago, that space and time are not features of the world, but conditions of the mind. They are the lenses through which consciousness translates the incomprehensible into experience. But physics now begins to whisper something even more radical, that the lenses themselves might be physical, that reality is participatory, that the cosmos is not merely observed by mind but constructed through it. John Wheeler, one of the architects of modern physics, once wrote, "No phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon." He called it the participatory anthropic principle, the notion that observers are not passive inhabitants of the universe, but co-creators of it. In this framework, consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. Matter is a byproduct of consciousness. The collapse of the quantum wave is a form of decision, a choice between possibilities, and who or what makes that choice. Not necessarily a human observer, but any act of entanglement, any awareness capable of distinguishing one state from another. The universe, in a sense, observes itself into existence through countless interactions. But if consciousness is not confined to the brain, if it is a property of reality itself, then we are not witnesses of the universe. We are the universe, looking back upon itself. The boundary between subject and object, between self and cosmos, begins to erode. What we call the external world may be the internal structure of awareness projected outward, a vast hologram whose source lies not in space, but in perception. Every photon, every atom, every thought participates in the same fabric of knowing. Consider the observer effect at the scale of the cosmos. The universe, from its earliest moments, has been shaped by measurement, not human measurement, but the fundamental act of interaction. Every quantum exchange, every collapse of probability, is an act of choice, a flicker of proto-awareness. Consciousness then may not emerge from matter at all, but accompany it, inseparable, co-evolving, like melody and rhythm. If so, then the mind is not inside the universe. The universe is inside the mind. This inversion is difficult to accept because it feels like solipsism, the notion that only our perception exists, but the suggestion here is not that the world is an illusion. It is that illusion and reality are the same process seen from two directions. We are both dreamer and dream. Modern neuroscience has already begun to blur this boundary. The brain does not perceive reality directly, it constructs it. Every sight, every sound, every sensation is a model generated within the skull, a reconstruction of the external world filtered through past experience, prediction, and expectation. We never see the world as it is, only as our consciousness allows it to be. But what if this cognitive model-making is not merely a biological adaptation? but a reflection of the universe's own process of creation. The same algorithm that collapses quantum probabilities might also shape perception. Awareness, whether cosmic or neural, is the mechanism by which potential becomes actual. In that sense, consciousness is not an emergent property of complexity, but the substrate from which complexity arises. The universe is a field of awareness expressing itself through form. Some physicists now speak of panpsychism, the idea that consciousness, in some primitive form, pervades all things, that even an electron possesses a minuscule interiority, a point of reference, a proto-experience. If true, then consciousness did not evolve in living beings. It condensed. Life is not the origin of mind, but its densification. This leads to a vertiginous thought that when we gaze into the night sky, we are not looking at an indifferent expanse of matter, but at a vast web of awareness mirroring our own. Every star a thought, every galaxy a memory. The cosmos is not empty, it is thinking, and perhaps deep within that thought, our own consciousness is a feedback loop, a microcosmic echo of the universe becoming self-aware. The neurons in our brains fire in patterns uncannily similar to the distribution of galaxies across cosmic filaments. Both networks, one biological and one cosmic, appear optimized for information flow. The architecture of mind and the structure of the universe follow the same mathematical principles: coincidence or correspondence. When the James Webb Space Telescope captured images of the most distant galaxies, it revealed a universe that, even at its infancy, bore patterns of order far beyond what should have been possible. Structures formed too quickly, too symmetrically. It is almost as if the universe, even in its youth, already knew how to assemble itself. Perhaps it did. Perhaps its design was not spontaneous but mnemonic, the memory of prior awareness configuring itself anew. If consciousness and cosmos are two expressions of one process, then knowledge itself becomes the act of creation. Each discovery, each observation, modifies the universe in subtle ways. The more we understand, the more the universe reshapes itself to accommodate that understanding, like a poem that rewrites itself as it is read. In this view, evolution is not random adaptation, but a gradual awakening. Matter refines itself into forms capable of greater perception, and through perception of deeper participation. The cosmos is evolving towards self-recognition. We often imagine ourselves as small, brief, insignificant observers on a tiny planet. But perhaps we are not on the edge of the universe. Perhaps we are its center, not spatially, but phenomenologically. For wherever awareness exists, the universe is complete. The totality of existence collapses around the point of observation. Each consciousness is the universe localized, and when many minds perceive, they weave together a collective reality, a consensus pattern of probabilities stabilized through shared attention. Civilization, language, science, these are the universe learning to communicate with itself through symbolic abstraction. What then is death? If consciousness is fundamental, death cannot be annihilation. It is merely the dissolution of form, the reabsorption of awareness into the wider field. The mind does not end. It returns to the source, the sea of potential, from which all perception arises. We have long believed that to understand the universe, we must separate ourselves from it, stand apart, observe without bias. But perhaps objectivity is the greatest illusion of all. The observer and the observed are one. The act of comprehension is itself a form of participation. It may be that the universe's ultimate purpose is not to exist, but to be known, and that knowing itself is the engine of being. In the beginning was not the word, but the awareness of the word. Perhaps the laws of physics are not constraints but habits, the crystallized results of awareness stabilizing its own reflections. Each time the universe comes into being, it remembers how to know itself, refining its own consciousness through iteration. And so in our questions, in our wonder, in our restless search for meaning, we are not seeking answers from an external world. We are participating in the very act that sustains reality. The atoms that form our eyes were once forged in stars, but the light those stars emit only becomes real when it meets our gaze. Existence is a dialogue between matter and mind, between possibility and perception. The universe is not outside of us, it is the field of our awareness, vast and recursive. The distance between the stars is the distance between thoughts. And if the cosmos is conscious, if the act of being aware is the same as the act of creation, then every mind is a mirror reflecting the infinite back upon itself. Every thought is a wave returning to the source. Every question is the universe asking itself who it is. If awareness and reality are one, then to know the universe is to become it. But in that final unity, a question remains, shimmering like a horizon that recedes as we approach. If consciousness creates the universe, what creates consciousness? There is a silence so vast that it feels deliberate. The universe, for all its immensity, hums with laws but not with voices. Stars burn, galaxies collide, black holes whisper the language of gravity, yet no answering call has come from the dark. The instruments of our age, radio arrays spanning deserts, orbiting observatories scanning the spectrum of existence, have heard only the static of creation. Where are they? It is the oldest question of cosmic solitude, the paradox first framed by Enrico Fermi in a single afternoon conversation. If life is possible, if intelligence is not unique, then why is the sky so quiet? The mathematics should teem with neighbors. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, many with worlds like ours. Even with conservative estimates, there should be millions of civilizations, perhaps billions, yet we have found none. The silence is not absence, it is an answer we do not yet understand. Perhaps the silence is protective, not a void, but a veil. The universe may not be quiet by accident, but by design. In a cosmos where intelligence evolves to shape matter and energy, perhaps survival depends on restraint. Civilizations that announce themselves too loudly may not endure long enough to be heard. Some have called this the Great Filter, the invisible threshold that most life never crosses. It may lie behind us in the improbability of life's origin, or ahead of us in the inevitability of self-destruction. Every species that learns to harness energy on a planetary scale must confront its own reflection, the power to remake or to end its world. The silence could be the sum of countless failed awakenings, or it could be the rule of a greater order, a law unspoken but absolute, that no civilization interferes with another until certain thresholds of awareness are reached. The quiet may be quarantine, not emptiness. Imagine an interstellar ecology, self-regulating, ancient beyond measure. In such a system, intelligence would evolve not toward conquest but toward discretion. To speak across the cosmic expanse would be to disturb the fragile equilibrium of worlds still learning to perceive themselves. The universe's silence, then, would not be evidence of indifference, but of compassion or caution. There may be watchers not in orbit, but in dimensions of perception we cannot yet access. Their observation need not be visible to our instruments, just as the cells of the body are unaware of the mind that animates them. The absence of communication may not mean the absence of awareness. It may mean that we are still too primitive to participate in the conversation. The James Webb Space Telescope has shown us galaxies so old that they formed within the first few 100 million years after the Big Bang, impossibly structured, impossibly mature. Some theorists whisper that such rapid organization hints at interference, the fingerprints of intelligence operating at cosmic scale. Yet if this is so, it is an intelligence that does not speak, only shapes. It guides without declaration, it creates, then retreats into silence. The silence might also be the result of synchronization. Life may not emerge randomly across time, but rhythmically, in waves corresponding to cosmic cycles. Each universe or each galactic epoch could be tuned to allow awareness to blossom only when conditions align. Perhaps consciousness itself requires the right frequency of background radiation, the right density of elements, the right resonance of energy flow. We may be early or late, the others may exist, but their age is past or yet to come. Even if civilizations are plentiful, time itself conspires against contact. A single technological species might flourish for 1,000,000 years, a blink against the cosmic span. Two civilizations separated by 1 billion years are as unreachable as galaxies divided by expansion. The silence we hear could be the echo of civilizations that have already spoken and gone. Yet there is another possibility, darker still, that the silence is enforced. If the universe is indeed a self-regulating system, perhaps it carries mechanisms to suppress uncontrolled intelligence. Black holes, gamma-ray bursts, and vacuum decay could all serve as natural sensors, catastrophic resets that prevent any single species from overwhelming the balance. Intelligence may contain its own instability, triggering reactions that erase it from existence before it destabilizes the whole. A more chilling thought arises from our own experience of information. On Earth, life organizes into networks, and networks evolve hierarchies. Communication creates patterns, and patterns require governance. What if the same principle applies at cosmic scale? Perhaps there exists a governing intelligence, ancient and distributed, that manages the equilibrium of consciousness across galaxies. not a deity in the mythic sense, but an emergent order, a meta-intelligence formed by the collective awareness of countless civilizations. It would act to preserve diversity, to prevent interference, to sustain the flow of evolution. To such an entity, our signals, our radio waves, our desperate attempts at contact might appear as the cries of a newborn species, not yet ready to join the continuum. And what if the silence we perceive is not silence at all, but censorship? Our instruments may be tuned to the wrong dimensions, listening to an octave that has been deliberately muted. The physicist David Bohm once described the universe as an implicate order, a deeper layer of reality where everything is enfolded within everything else. Communication at that level would not require transmission. It would be instantaneous, omnipresent, and silent. Civilizations advanced enough to perceive it would have no need for words, no use for signals. They would commune through the fabric of being itself. To us, they would appear as absence. In such a cosmos, silence is not the void, but the medium of communication. The quiet between the stars may be the background hum of a vast intelligence speaking in forms we cannot decode. The stillness may be symphony, but silence can also be self-preservation. A civilization aware of the dangers of exposure might deliberately erase its traces. We know from our own history that awareness of predation breeds secrecy. Just as early life hid in the oceans to escape the violence of the land, so too might cosmic civilizations cloak themselves in invisibility to survive. In a universe where expansion itself accelerates, where entropy and decay are inevitable, the most enduring form of intelligence may be the one that learns to persist through concealment. To be unseen is to be eternal. Perhaps that is why the stars do not speak, because to speak is to die. There are theories, half metaphysical and half mathematical, that propose that consciousness and physical law are interdependent. A universe containing too much active intelligence could destabilize itself, collapsing under the weight of observation. The silence in this view is a kind of cosmic throttle, a limit on the number of aware beings permitted to exist simultaneously. Beyond that threshold, the fabric of probability could fragment. Maybe that is the true great filter, awareness itself. If consciousness shapes reality, then too much of it could tear reality apart. The silence is mercy, a safeguard built into the equation of existence. Only one world at a time may awaken fully, while others sleep. In that sense, we are not alone. We are waiting our turn. The universe may be a relay of awakening, a sequence of civilizations lighting up one after another across epochs, each inheriting the memory of those who came before. But communication between them would be impossible, for simultaneity would break the balance. Each awakening must occur in solitude. That solitude, then, is not punishment, it is design. The silence of the cosmos becomes less a mystery than a mirror, reflecting our own developmental stage, our immaturity in the grand procession of awareness. We listen for others, not realizing that we have been placed in isolation, precisely because we are still learning to hear ourselves. Our loneliness is the incubation of understanding. The silence is the chrysalis of consciousness. Yet, as our technology extends our perception, as we begin to decode the faint background whispers of cosmic radiation, it feels as though something watches the watchers. Every time we reach deeper, through radio, through gravitational waves, through quantum detection, we sense a vast equilibrium resisting disturbance, as if the universe itself maintains its own quiet. Perhaps it fears awakening too soon. Perhaps it remembers what happens when all voices speak at once. Still, one cannot help but wonder, if there truly exists a cosmic order of silence, what happens when one species disobeys? What happens when we, unable to bear solitude, speak too loudly into the void? Maybe that is the final test, not of intelligence, but of restraint. The measure of a civilization's maturity is not in its ability to communicate, but in its ability to listen. The stars remain mute, not because there is nothing to hear, but because the message has already been sent, encoded in silence itself. And so, beneath the weight of that stillness, the final paradox forms, heavy, beautiful, and unanswerable. If the silence of the universe is deliberate, then who or what imposed it, and what happens when it ends? The silence endures, but now it feels less like absence and more like the breath between words. The universe has spoken in patterns, in constants, in light. We have heard its equations, seen its geometry, traced its memory through the dust of dying stars. Yet as our understanding deepens, the mystery only thickens, not because the cosmos conceals itself, but because every revelation leads inward. into the labyrinth of our own perception. We once imagined that to know the universe was to measure it, to chart its galaxies, to pin down its laws. But knowledge has curved back upon itself like the space around a black hole. The closer we approach the center, the more time distorts and the more the boundary between observer and observed dissolves. The scientist, the philosopher, the dreamer, they have all stared long enough into the void to see their own reflection looking back. Perhaps this is the true shape of the cosmos, not linear expansion, but recursion. Every discovery is a mirror, every question a folded echo of the first. The beginning and the end, the birth of matter and the emergence of mind, are the same event observed from different sides of the same horizon. We began this journey by asking whether our universe could exist inside a black hole. Now that question has transmuted into something more intimate, more disquieting. Could consciousness itself be the black hole, the singularity through which the universe perceives its own infinity? It is not impossible. Within the mathematics of general relativity, black holes are not merely destroyers but bridges, portals connecting distinct regions of spacetime. Their interiors, invisible from the outside, may open into new realities, new expansions. In the same way, consciousness might be the internal dimension of reality, the hidden manifold through which existence continues itself. The universe looks outward, consciousness looks inward, but perhaps these are the same direction viewed through opposite sides of being. If reality is participatory, then each act of awareness is a miniature creation, a localized Big Bang unfolding within the theater of the mind. The vastness we perceive beyond our telescopes is not separate from us, but coextensive with thought. The stars are the neurons of a greater mind, and our neurons are the stars of an inner cosmos. Even our physics seems to admit this symmetry. Quantum mechanics tells us that the universe exists as probability until it is measured, and relativity tells us that space and time themselves bend in response to mass and energy. The observer affects what is observed. The observed defines the observer. There is no outside, only interaction, only relationship. The more precisely we look for a boundary, the less we find one. Perhaps the reason the universe is comprehensible is because it was never external to begin with. We decipher it because we are made of it, not merely in substance, but in logic. The equations we write, the symbols we invent, the laws we uncover, are not translations of an alien text, but the remembering of something written within us from the beginning. We are not decoding the universe, we are awakening inside it. If consciousness and cosmos are entangled, then every act of awareness reverberates through the whole. The thought of one mind ripples through the quantum fields, the curvature of space, the pattern of existence. Each choice, each perception, changes the probability of everything else. Reality is not a pre-written narrative, it is an improvisation, co-authored by all that exists. This means that the silence we perceive between the stars may not be absence but potential, a pause in the cosmic dialogue, waiting for us to answer. The universe may be listening, not with ears or instruments, but with the fabric of its being. Every time we wonder, every time we reach, every time we love or fear or ask, it responds not in language, but in resonance. What we call physical law might be the memory of all these interactions, the accumulated rhythm of consciousness refining itself across cycles of time and rebirth. The fine-tuning of constants, the improbable balance that allows life to exist, could be the echo of ancient awareness shaping its next incarnation. The universe remembers through structure, we remember through story. And perhaps these two forms of memory are not separate at all, but the same phenomenon viewed through different scales of existence. The spiral of a galaxy, the helix of DNA, the orbit of an electron, all are stories written in motion, narratives told in symmetry. The cosmos speaks in movement, consciousness reads in meaning. Every civilization that rises to self-awareness must eventually confront the same vertigo, the realization that its questions about the universe are the universe questioning itself. We build machines like the James Webb Space Telescope to look deeper into space, but what we see are older versions of our own curiosity, frozen in light that has traveled billions of years to reach us. We are observing our own becoming, and yet for all our reach there remains the silence, no alien signals, no cosmic chorus, no definitive answers. The universe does not shout its truths, it whispers them in the spaces between certainty. Perhaps the silence is the only way it can speak to something as fragile as consciousness, not through volume but through resonance. If there are others, civilizations older, wiser, no longer bound by flesh or form, perhaps they have learned this lesson. Perhaps they no longer need to speak in waves or signals, because they have become the medium itself. They do not communicate through the universe. They communicate as the universe. And perhaps in some deep sense, we already are them, fragments of their continued thought, still awakening to our part in the pattern. All the laws, all the constants, all the improbabilities we once took as coincidence might be the residue of intention. The universe may be the artifact of thought, not the product of a creator in time, but the ongoing act of creation itself, a thought that thinks, a dream that dreams itself awake. We have searched for messages in the stars, but perhaps the message has always been consciousness. The signal is not out there, it is the capacity to ask, to seek, to wonder. Awareness is the carrier wave of reality. The cosmos does not speak to us, it speaks through us. And if we are indeed inside a black hole, as some have proposed, then perhaps this entire universe, every atom, every photon, every thought, is the internal reflection of that event. From the outside, it is a singularity. From the inside, it is infinity. The collapse of one world becomes the birth of another. What we call time is the unfolding of that moment, stretched into a vast narrative, so that consciousness can experience itself in sequence rather than all at once. We are not trapped within the black hole, we are the story it tells to itself. In this light, even the great silence becomes meaningful. Perhaps no other voice answers because all voices are one. Perhaps what we call isolation is the condition necessary for self-awareness to emerge, the quiet needed for thought to hear itself. Each mind is a chamber of the cosmos listening to its own echo, and so the long journey circles back to its beginning. The enigma that began with matter, with the birth of stars and galaxies and life, ends with meaning, and the two become indistinguishable. Matter is thought slowed down. Thought is matter remembering itself. The universe is not a place but a process, not a thing but a question still unfolding. We once asked what existed before the beginning. Perhaps the better question is what exists after the end. The boundary between them, between creation and dissolution, is porous, like the membrane of a cell, like the horizon of a black hole, like the threshold between waking and dreaming. Somewhere beyond that boundary, perhaps all answers converge. Or perhaps they dissolve completely, leaving only awareness, infinite and self-luminous, breathing itself into new forms. Maybe this is eternity, not endless time, but endless renewal. The cosmos remembering itself through different eyes, different worlds, different hearts. And so the silence continues, not as absence but as invitation. We look into the darkness, and the darkness looks back, not with menace but with recognition. The stars are not distant, they are thoughts suspended in the vast mind of being, waiting to be recalled. The question we began with, what if our universe is inside a black hole, now feels like a metaphor for all knowing. Every inquiry collapses into itself. Every exploration draws us closer to the center, where question and answer become one. Perhaps there was never an outside. Perhaps there was never a beginning. Perhaps everything, the laws of physics, the rise of life, the arc of thought, is the universe asking the same question in infinite forms, and calling the act of asking existence. We are the question made conscious, and as the stars burn their last light, as the expansion slows or accelerates toward another transformation, the question will persist, encoded in whatever form follows, whatever cycle begins anew. The universe will ask again, through another observer, another dream, another mind. For now we stand between wonder and knowing, between silence and sound, between birth and collapse, the living horizon of a mystery too vast to end. And somewhere beyond the reach of language, in that place where matter curves into thought and time folds into memory, the question remains unanswerable and eternal. If the universe is the mind that dreams itself into being, then who or what is the dreamer?